you miss some of the highlights of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee?
Hip, hip.
At the climax of that great celebration, the concert outside the palace, Prince Charles first saluted his mother.
Your Majesty, Mummy.
Then ignited a gigantic chorus of good wishes to his father, who was in hospital.
The only sad thing about this evening is that my father couldn't be here with us, because unfortunately he is taken on well. But, ladies and gentlemen, if we shout loud enough, he might just hear us in hospital and get...
His sense of service, driven by wartime experiences, never deserted him, with his grandson at Remembrance Day attending commemorations at the Cenotaph in London, and visiting a design workshop and museum, still flashing his crinkly smile, but looking very tired. In these final years of his life, Philip saw the real fruits of a royal evolution he did so much to bring about. His own feisty, humorous and practical nature, long a counterbalance to the Queen's restraint, rubbing off, in particular, on two grandsons, William and Harry. They have followed in his footsteps through military service, inherited his sense of mischief and know how to shrug off the trappings of royalty. The very characteristics that endeared Philip to so many and sometimes landed him in strife. There was, however, one controversy, not of his own making for once, when adding to his lengthy catalogue of ancient titles and honours, Prince Philip was knighted by Australia. In 2017, whispers that an announcement from the palace was almost certainly about the passing of Prince Philip. It turned out to be a simple decision to step down from royal duties.
But I'm sorry, you're standing down. I can't stand up much.
Then the car crash that forced the prince to surrender his driver's licence. And more dramas. The Epstein scandal forcing Prince Andrew to step back from royal duties.
Was I right in having him as a friend at the time? Bearing in mind this was some years before he was accused of being a sex offender. I don't think there was anything wrong then.
Another crisis, decision of Harry and Meghan to go it alone.
After all the talk, rumours and speculation, it is now official, a date for which Harry and Meghan will say goodbye to royal life.
But for all the family upheavals and the foot-in-mouth moments, Prince Philip always stood strong. This photo released to mark his 99th birthday. The Duke, who became the longest-serving consort in British history, beside his Queen.
The sad passing of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. We have a message here from the Governor-General. It reads, "It is my solemn and melancholy duty to advise that His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, has passed away earlier today. I have informed the Prime Minister and I understand the Government will make further announcements concerning funeral arrangements and how Australians can express their condolences in due course. This is a sad and historic day. As we mourn, we should also reflect and give thanks for His Royal Highness' lifetime of service, devotion and commitment. Service beginning with his time in the Royal Navy, including during the Second World War when he was mentioned in dispatches while a young sub-lieutenant on HMS Valiant. Devotion to Her Majesty the Queen, whom he married in 1947 and lovingly supported throughout his life, and to the entire royal family. We're now going to a story on Dickie Arbiter, who is the Press Secretary for the Duke and the Queen.
Well, Prince Philip's arrangements were written quite a long time ago. It was very specific, being a formal naval officer, very much Navy and military oriented, that, yes, there would be a special arrangement. For example, he would lie at the Chapel Royal, Windsor, and from there his coffin would be borne to Victoria Station to be taken out to Windsor, and it would be borne on a naval gun carriage pulled by Naval Ratings, and that was his naval connection, and he was very adamant about that. And then again in Windsor, arriving at Windsor and Eton Riverside Station, it would then be pulled up the hill again by Naval Ratings. That's quite a hill to pull, but he was very adamant that Navy should play a key role in his funeral arrangements. The rest of it is pretty standard service at St George's Chapel, and he would not have a service at Westminster Abbey. His service would be at St George's Chapel, and then the interment afterwards. But it was a naval-based funeral arrangement. The Navy is aware of its commitment to Prince Philip's funeral, so it would have from time to time rehearsed the movement on a gun carriage. Quite a few ratings are required to pull the gun carriage and keep it steady. So that would have been rehearsed, and naval ratings change, crews change. So that would have been rehearsed. The other logistics that would be involved and are involved is that invitations being sent out, because there would be a considerable number of people who would want to attend. The service being in St George's Chapel, St George's Chapel holds about 800 people, so it's a limited congregation, but there are key people that would have to be invited, and a number of those would be, Prince Philip's behest, would be people involved in his charities, military commanders whom he was associated with. For example, the Royal Marines, he was Captain General of the Royal Marines for over 60 years. So there would be representation there. So invitations would have to be sent out. And the family obviously notified and a date set at a specific time when everybody can be assembled, but bearing in mind that there might well be people coming from quite far off. So there has to be a lead time. But the funeral really is D+9. And that gives plenty of time for the logistics to be put into place.
Dickie Arbiter there, who was the former press secretary for the Duke of Edinburgh and the Queen. If you've just joined us, the very sad news is that His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, has passed away at the age of 99. He died at Windsor Castle earlier today. The Duke was a great lover of Australia. He and the Queen had many visits here. We're going to look now at some of the time he spent down under.
She was the first reigning monarch to set foot on Australian soil, her husband duly by her side. In 1954, Prince Philip joined Her Majesty in a visit of every state and territory, a visit so extensive 75% of the Australian population of the day had the opportunity to see the royal couple at least once. Just 2 years later, the Duke made the journey again, this time alone, to open the Melbourne Olympic Games.
We're just going to break away from that story at the moment. The Prime Minister in England, Boris Johnson, is about to make a speech. Let's see if we can join him now.
And a proud and loving father, grandfather, and in recent years, great-grandfather. Speaking on their golden wedding anniversary, Her Majesty said that our country owed her husband a greater debt than he would ever claim or we shall ever know. And I'm sure that estimate is correct. So we mourn today with Her Majesty the Queen. We offer our condolences to her and to all her family. And we give thanks as a nation and a kingdom for the extraordinary life and work of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh.
Very sad and very solemn. Boris Johnson there on the death of the Duke of Edinburgh at the age of 99. He passed away earlier today. Let's now go back to that story, and we mentioned before about his great love of Australia and the visits that he had here.
She was the first reigning monarch to set foot on Australian soil, her husband duly by her side. In 1954, Prince Philip joined Her Majesty in a visit of every state and territory, a visit so extensive 75% of the Australian population of the day had the opportunity to see the royal couple at least once. Just 2 years later, the Duke made the journey again, this time alone, to open the Melbourne Olympic Games, the first in the Southern Hemisphere. While Her Majesty's schedule prevented her from attending, Prince Philip was so keen to be at the Games, he was allowed 5 days with no official engagements so he could enjoy events.
Down under, goes over the top.
It would not be his last sporting visit here, the Commonwealth Games in 1982.
The Games provide a wonderful opportunity to cement friendships amongst people who share a common language, but who might otherwise never have met.
Throughout the decades, Prince Philip was a familiar royal visitor, usually at the side of the monarch he swore to serve, always a step behind, the ultimate support act. On every mode of transport, in every climatic condition Australia can muster, the Duke stood by.
In Dubbo, there's been nothing like it for 38 years.
Although it was hardly the last time the Duke would come face to face with a marsupial or two. And not for the first time, he displayed a talent he spent many decades perfecting.
You are now about to watch the world's most experienced pluck unveiler unveil this pluck.
He greeted countless adoring crowds and witnessed more than a few royal salutes. On Australia Day in 2015, the Duke of Edinburgh was again at the centre of a controversy not of his own making, though, when the Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, bestowed on him a knighthood.
Prince Philip has been a great servant of Australia.
Widely ridiculed, it raised questions about Mr Abbott's judgment and possibly the bemusement of Prince Philip, who received his honour from the Queen. The last time Australians saw Prince Philip was in 2011, an 11-day tour again at the side of Her Majesty. Startled for once by a bunch of flowers, although he also showed his deftness at delivering them. A scene we will never see again, although they remain memories millions of Australians will cherish. Eddie Meyer, 9 News.
And just to hand a statement from the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, and I'll read it for you. For nearly 80 years, Prince Philip served his crown, his country and the Commonwealth. His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh was, in the words of Her Majesty, her strength and stay. He embodied a generation that will never be seen again. Beginning as a naval cadet in 1939, he served in war and peace. When Her Majesty ascended the throne, the Duke ended his military service and became her constant support. Prince Philip was no stranger to Australia, having visited our country on more than 20 occasions. Through his service to the Commonwealth, he presided as patron or president for nearly 50 organisations in Australia. Given his own service, Prince Philip also had a strong connection with the Australian Defence Force for 65 years. The Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme was encouraged and has encouraged over 775,000 young Australians to explore their leadership potential. 40,000 young Australians are currently participating in the program right now. Australians send our love and deepest condolences to Her Majesty and all the royal family. The Commonwealth family joins together in sorrow and thanksgiving for the loss and life of Prince Philip. God bless from all here in Australia. That is the message from the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison. The Duke of Edinburgh was known for devotion to duty and his devotion to the Queen. He also had an exceptional personality, which emerged at nearly every engagement he attended. Sometimes, though, there were some gaffes.
Very early in his tenure as Queen's consort, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, conceded that he was experienced in the self-declared study of dontopodology, the science of opening your mouth and putting your foot in it. The prince was so prolific in the field of study, several tomes have been produced over the decades, documenting what one book titled as his wise word and golden gaffes.
As a patron of the college, I give myself a very hearty welcome.
He conceded to a relative when he was 21 that he was rude and unmannerly, and he took that undaunted and occasionally amusing attitude into the next 75 years of royal duties. On meeting the President of Nigeria, dressed in the national costume in 2003, Philip inquired that he looked ready for bed. A visit to Beijing in 1986 was described as ghastly. Mind you, Philip said the same about the British town Stoke-on-Trent, economy class air travel, the colour of Elton John's Aston Martin, and the singing of Tom Jones. Actually, he described Tom's singing as bloody awful. Australians, though, were not immune to his outspokenness. The Prince asking Cate Blanchett to have a look at a loose cord in the back of a DVD player because she worked in the film industry.
And I can't work out whether I put the green cord in or the red cord.
And on a tour of Queensland in 2002, he inquired of an Aboriginal leader if they still threw spears at each other.
Prince Philip has put his foot in it again.
There was one part of the world where he mattered not what he said, as he was a living god. On one small Vanuatu island, Philip was viewed as the son of a mountain spirit who would return after marrying a powerful woman. After the royals visited there in 1974, Philip was deemed to be that spirit, the villagers declaring him a living god. Philip would pose with the local hunting club called a Now Now, making no other comment, perhaps chuffed that in this small part of the world, it was he who was the divine being. Airlie Walsh, 9 News.
Tonight we are remembering Prince Philip, who has passed away at the age of 99. Now, European correspondent Ben Avery is on the phone for us. And Ben, firstly, can you tell us what's the reaction like there in Britain?
Michael, good evening. As you can imagine, the news now breaking on radios and televisions across the country, and it's obviously a sombre mood here. This is something that was not a huge surprise. He had been sick for many months now. It's only been 3 weeks since he was released from hospital. He was in hospital for a month in total, his longest ever stay in hospital. He was in King Edward VII Hospital, treated for an infection there. A couple of weeks in, he had to be transported to a different hospital that specialised in heart procedures. He had a heart procedure there for a few days, was then taken back to King Edward VII and was discharged, as I say, around 3 weeks ago now, and taken back to Windsor Castle. We saw him wheeled out of the hospital in a wheelchair, and look, didn't look very well. He is 99 years old, sadly just 2 months out from his 100th birthday. So the country goes into a period of national mourning here now, but the usual protocols go out the window for a number of reasons. The first one being that we're in COVID-19, obviously, at the moment. So a lockdown in place still in London. In fact, it gets eased somewhat on Monday, where pubs, restaurants, cafes, things like that will be reopened. But what that means for a situation like this, we're unsure. So what kind of processions will there be? What will the funeral look like? All of that up in the air, as I say, due to COVID. But the second factor as well is that Prince Philip didn't want a huge funeral. He didn't want a big fuss to be made when this day came. So we'll find out perhaps in the coming 24 hours or so exactly how this all unfolds. But one thing we do know is that the country will be in mourning. This is someone that has been a huge figure in the royal family for many decades now, a huge support to the Queen. Much loved by a lot of people in the country for the fact that he stood by the Queen for so long. He was a straight shooter. He told her as it was. A lot of people respected him for that. And so these are all the stories that we'll start to hear in the coming days. And then preparation for a funeral, as I say, what form that will take, we'll probably find out in the coming hours, in the coming days.
Ben, he was so popular. One of the most extraordinary things is the longevity of the marriage between he and the Queen. There are generations that know nothing else. This is what they've always been used to, the Duke and the Queen together. And he was still enormously popular. And the fact that he was in hospital generated so much interest.
Yeah, that's right. As you say, with the Queen for so long, they were married 5 years before she became the Queen, so he's been by her side throughout that journey. It's going to be a difficult period for her now. We know that it's going to hit other members of the royal family very hard as well. He's become closer and closer with Charles as the years went on. He was the only one that went and visited his father in hospital for that month-long stay. Again, COVID-19. A factor in that as well, given that over here at the moment you can only go and visit people in hospital under really extreme circumstances. So that was perhaps a sign that Prince Philip wasn't well at that time. But I'll talk about Charles, but also let's think about the grandchildren. He had 8 grandchildren, 10 great-grandchildren, of course, among them Prince William, Prince Harry. Prince William had spoken about his fondness for his grandfather. Prince Harry will presumably now, if circumstances allow, return from the United States for this. So a family that's been, I guess, divided in the past few weeks will need to come together for this significant moment in the family's history.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, so many unanswered questions about the service or a potential funeral, with quarantining and people wanting to come to Britain to pay their respects and how that will unfold. It's interesting when you look back at such a remarkable career, because it wasn't just in the public life with the royal family. His military career was also highly successful. And as you said, he had a huge influence, didn't he, on all of the royal family from a very young age.
Yeah, he did, and you speak about his military service. He was very proud of that, and he had a lot of honorary military titles right throughout his life. He did a lot of work for not just the military, but so many community organisations over the years. He was someone that was known to be extremely hardworking. He wrote all of his speeches. He didn't just go and read something that someone else had written. He actually put thought into what he was saying. He cared about a lot of causes as well. It's been much documented how much work he'd done for the environment, something that he'd passed down to Prince Charles and to Prince William as well. They're carrying on that work today. But that is something that perhaps a lot of people in Australia in particular don't see day to day, is that the royal family do go out, several times a week, many times a week. They're meeting with community groups. They're working with the underprivileged. And Prince Philip, right up until his retirement only a couple of years ago, was doing up to more than 300 engagements a year on his own. All things that perhaps didn't get highlighted a lot, but he was an extremely hardworking member of the royal family, and that's something that I guess they've missed since his retirement a few years ago.
Since your time that you've been a European correspondent and living in London, have you found the way the British feel about the royal family? We sometimes hear that perhaps interest or support is waning. How do you see it at the moment?
I think it's...
We might have just lost Ben Avey there, who's our European correspondent from London there. On the very sad passing, Prince Philip has passed away at the age of 99. He died at Windsor Castle. It is a very sad day. We're going to take a break right now, back with more on a historic but very sad day.